Welcome to Travel Secrets with me, Tanya Rose, the podcast sharing wisdom for fellow travellers. Each week, I ask my guests to reveal their 6 travel secrets and the trips and holidays that uncover them. Today, my guest is my hilarious and lovely friend, actor and dame of all dames from British pantomime, Christopher Biggins. Biggins won and is King of the Jungle from 2007 in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. He has been in so many roles that I can't possibly name them all, but a few do come to mind, which was the vilest man on television in Poldark, the original, which you were unbelievable in.
Well, that's very kind of. I loved playing him. He was called Ozzie Whitworth, and he was just the most horrible person. He was voted the most horrible man in the world
Was he?
by the Daily Mail viewers that year, and he was a sex-crazed vicar. That's all I can say, and I loved every moment of him.
And you were magnificent as him, but I actually do agree he probably was the most hateful man that could possibly have been there.
It was interesting. I did a series called I, Claudius,
Yes,
playing Nero, which I adored.
Yeah.
And then the next day, the producer of Poldark rang the producer of I, Claudius and said, "What's this Biggins like?" And he gave me a very good review, and I got the role immediately. So it was
Well, you were
fantastic.
absolutely wonderful.
Thank
and
you.
as we were talking about recently with my son, one of his very favourite videos that he watched when he was younger was Joseph. And you were, of course, in Joseph,
I know,
which
I
was wonderful.
adored playing again. That was, it's amazing. I've had the most fantastic career. And I look back at my CV and I think, did I do all these things? I mean, I'm quite old now, you see. I'm 75 years old. And so, I have done them all, but it's been such a wonderful, varied career. I've been very lucky.
Well, you're magnificent at it, and you have travelled extensively because of it. And one of the trips I read that you did after the Celebrity Jungle was that you went on the final voyage of the QE2 cruise ship. Is that right?
It was absolutely right. As a little perk, a little thank you, they sent me. Neil, my partner, and myself, we went to South America. We've flown club class to South America, and we picked up the ship there, and we went to Tonga, Tahiti, Easter Island.
Oh,
and as we
amazing.
approached Easter Island, which of course is extraordinary, they said the weather's not very good, and we might not be able to get to Easter Island, where we all went bananas because we all wanted to go. And when you get there, they have these extraordinary heads,
Yeah.
which are all over the island, and it's very unpopulated. And it was fantastic. And then from there we went to New Zealand, and then from New Zealand into Australia. And because it was the last voyage of the QE2, everybody came out to say goodbye to her.
Oh, how wonderful.
So it was very emotional, and it was. She was the most wonderful liner.
Well, I know you love cruising, and I'm sure we'll talk about that during your travel secrets. So I can't wait to hear your travel tales. But before I actually ask you some of these secrets, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how travel has impacted you?
As an actor, one is lucky enough to do good jobs and work, but the travel is a real bonus. And it's marvelous to go. I mean, Poldark, which you so nicely talked about, we went to Cornwall. I mean, it's not a great distance, but it is a wonderful county, and it is the most wonderful part of our country.
Yeah.
And I think there are lots of places in Great Britain which are wonderful to travel to. So it was a joy to go with Winston Graham, who wrote the Poldark novels, was a great traveller as well, but only to places like Cornwall. And of course, he wrote Poldark and other books about that place. We were on a beach once, sunbathing, and there was a woman reading one of his books in front of us, sunbathing. So she went into the sea to swim, and he went over and signed the book without telling her. So I wonder if she'll ever have thought to herself to look in the front of the book to see All Love, Winston Graham.
That
It
is
was
so
hysterical.
lovely. What a wonderful story. So travel's been very much part of you and who you are
Yes,
and your
I
life.
think so. And it is great to travel. I mean, it's...
What did you do as you were a child growing up? Did you holiday?
Yes, I was born in Oldham, outside Manchester, and my mother hated it. My father was from Manchester, but my mother was a Hampshire hog, and she couldn't wait to get out. And after 3 weeks, I had terrible pneumonia, And she brought me down the back of a Pickford's lorry wrapped in cotton wool. And to this today, I have an aversion to cotton wool. I can't bear it.
Really?
Anyway, we came down to Salisbury, and I spent all my early days until I was 18 years old in Salisbury. And we used to go to all the places around that area. And we went one summer, we went to Butlins, and it was fantastic to be able to go to Butlins. It was a wonderful thing. And I think I was like 8 years old. I entered the fancy dress competition in one of my mother's swimsuits and a wig, and Miss Butlins, whatever the year was, I can't remember now, and I won it.
With her high heels?
With her high heels.
That's
I mean, it was just, those were the first days, I think,
wonderful.
of me being a dame.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So
I
it was
would love
great.
to see a photograph of that. That is fantastic.
There is a photograph, I must try and find it, but I mean, it was a great time, and I suppose it was sort of, I never discussed my sexuality with my parents, but they must have thought to themselves, perhaps this is the beginning of the end.
And you're a very happily married man, so I'm sure they
I
were
am,
delighted.
I am.
Let's go on to your travel secrets. What is the number one destination you think everybody should go to once in their lifetime?
Well, it's a very interesting question, of course, because the world is so big and there are so many wonderful places, but my choice would be New York. And I think New York, because New York is a great city to go to. And also, it doesn't really, I mean, if you're rich, wherever you go is fantastic.
Yeah.
But you can go there poor.
Yeah.
You don't need the money. You can do lots of wonderful things. There's marvelous trips you can get on flights, which are quite reasonable. You know, I think you can go to probably New York for a couple of £100. So the traveling is easy. And then you can find hotels, and the food, I think it's getting more expensive, a bit like this country. But I think there's more opportunities for young people to be able to really have a good time. And of course, New York is so exciting. It's a wonderful city.
It is a city that never sleeps.
It never sleeps. And I've had some wonderful times there. I mean, absolutely marvelous.
What do you do when you go to New York?
Well, I usually go, I mean, I remember I went on the first ever Virgin flight. We were guests of Richard Branson, and it was fantastic, except that all the press, they filled the rucksacks with champagne, which was, you know, and they stole all this champagne.
You're
I mean, you couldn't
joking.
believe
That's
it.
very naughty.
But we had a wonderful trip over, and I remember going, and we arrived, I think, in the morning, and I went to see 3 shows that day. And that is the marvelous thing about New York, is that you can see so many things, and the theatre there is fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And the food was I think it's changed a bit now. It's sadly, London and New York now are charging ridiculous prices for theatre, but you can still go and you can get a good seat at a good price. And I think it's a very exciting city for people to go to.
And actually, the tourist attractions, you know, like the Empire State Building, you know, there's always a queue, but you can get the jump pass. But somebody told me this once. If you go to the top of the Rock, you know, the Rockefeller Center,
Yes.
which there are never any queues, you get a pass, and you go up at sunset, the same as you would up the Empire State Building, you literally have exactly the same view, but without the queues. So you can do things like that. You can find clever ways of actually doing tourist attractions without spending a fortune.
Absolutely. And the artwork too is fantastic. The galleries are all there. I mean, and shopping, of course. I remember when I first went to New York, I would take an empty suitcase.
I know, not any longer though.
No, not any longer, because we'd buy sheets and pillowcases and duvet covers because they were so pretty. And it was, you know, and I used to buy my glasses. You used to go to Cohen's, and you could go in the morning, and they would test your eyes, and you go in the afternoon and pick up your glasses.
I know, so wonderful.
And for nothing.
I know, nothing.
It was
I used to
wonderful.
go to Century 21, which was the designer,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
secondhand things.
Yeah.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. But that actually sadly does not exist anymore. And there's an amazing pharmacist opposite the Carlyle, which is one of my favorite hotels in New
Adore
York.
the Carlyle.
And there's an amazing chemist called Zittimer's. Did you ever
Yes,
go in there
yes.
where you could buy everything? And, you know, things like melatonin, which you can't buy here. You have to have a prescription,
Yes,
which is
I
just
know.
ridiculous. So
I
I
know.
used to fill my suitcase up with all of that Advil and melatonin and all those sort
I
of
first
things.
met my friend Dame Joan Collins at the Carlyle.
Did you?
We went to see someone sing, And we were introduced, and then we sat down, and we never stopped talking throughout the whole of the show. The person who was singing to us must have been furious.
Was that at Café Carlyle?
Yeah,
I
Café
hope it wasn't
Carlyle.
Eartha Kitt. She would have
No,
given
no,
you what
no.
for, because she was always there, wasn't she?
Yeah, but there are wonderful things you can do. A bit like London, you can find things to do for nothing, and it's an easy.
Do you have a favourite place that you go to when you go to New York?
I have a friend called Cameron McIntosh who has a gorgeous apartment there. We're very lucky. If he's not there, we can use it. Actually, if he's there, we can use it as well. So that's good. And that's near Carnegie Hall.
Oh, wonderful.
And opposite the Carnegie Hall, there's the Carnegie Deli.
Oh, is there?
Which is fantastic. It's like a sort of metal container. And you go there, and it's really, they pile your plate so high with food. It's divine.
Pastrami sandwiches and bagels.
Yes,
How
wonderful.
delicious. How lovely.
So I like it. I like that area very much.
New York I think everybody should go to New York.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's an exciting place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you. What is your most unexpected travel experience?
Well, I think I have to put down the Maldives, which is fantastic. And we've been there several times, and we love it because it's somewhere to go where you can't do anything. You can't go shopping, really. You can't. All you do is
Can't see any culture.
No, nothing like that. You just lie, or you sit and you eat and you drink and you rest, and it's fantastic. And Neil and I went to a resort in the Maldives, and there was a restaurant, an underwater restaurant, and there was a couple, an American couple, who were staying there at the same time. And I think it's sat about 14 people. And we went to book, and they said, no, it's booked for a private party. So we said, oh, really? Who? And they said, it's a couple, American couple. And they've just taken the whole restaurant.
Wanted the whole evening, yeah.
Just the two of them. And we found out later that they went into the restaurant, and they sat there surrounded by all these wonderful fish swimming around. And she said, I'm just going to go to the lavatory. And she went to the lavatory, and he sat there. And then suddenly, above him, swimming with all the fish, was her, stark naked. I mean,
that
unbelievable.
Is hilarious.
Hilarious and terribly chic, I thought.
Oh, very chic. No wonder she wanted it for nobody else
I know,
to be
exactly.
seen.
The waiters, they must have had a wonderful time.
I bet they had a marvellous time. Isn't that extraordinary? That
and I think
really
that is a wonderful thing.
Very, very chic indeed.
Yeah.
So you've been a few times to the Maldives. Do you know where you've stayed?
The particular one where this lady was, I think, the Hilton.
Yes, the one with the underwater restaurant is
yes,
the Hilton.
But I think they've got a few more underwater restaurants. But that was, I think, one of the first ones.
Absolutely.
And so we stayed there, but it is literally for getting away and doing nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
And I love the idea. I mean, we stayed on one of the bungalows on the water, which was fantastic. A little unnerving somehow. But I think we've also stayed in some of the bungalows on the mainland.
Yeah.
Well, of course, you say mainland. It's not really a mainland.
No, they're usually the islands anyway, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. But it is a wonderful place to go away and do nothing.
So let's go on to your third travel secret. What's the most overrated or underrated travel experience you've ever had?
Well, I love going to exotic places, and a friend of mine who was an Archdeacon of London, we decided we would go to China. And we went to China, and we went mainly to see the Terracotta Warriors in Xi'an. So we were a group of about 12, and I, for some unknown reason, was made sort of in charge of this group.
Tour guide.
And they suddenly came to me and they said, oh, it's because we're sorry, but unfortunately, we can't find an aeroplane to take you all to the Terracotta Warriors. So I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, I'm afraid to say, if you don't take us there, I will make this publicly known and you'll never take anybody there ever again. And I was a little over the top. And they said, oh. And they went away and they came back and they said, tomorrow you're going to go to the military base of China in a bus. So we all went in this bus, and we got to the airport, and we were put in an aeroplane, and the aeroplane never went any higher, that we could always see Chinese people planting rice.
Oh my goodness, so it really was low.
Very, very low. And there was a curtain between us and the captain, and behind the curtain there was a flame, and on the flame there was a kettle, and this girl kept bringing from the back to us tea. and we were more worried about
the open flame.
Exactly, the open flame. But we did get to Xi'an to see the Terracotta Warriors, of course, which were magnificent.
Amazing.
Have you ever seen them?
I saw them when they were here in the museum, so it wasn't all of it. They just bought a little bit.
To see them in situ is extraordinary, and it's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, there are literally tens of thousands of them, and they're all individually faces, and everything. We did have a good time, I must say. And on the way back, I bought a terracotta horse, and it was shipping all the way back to London, but from China to London cost a fortune. So we went to an airport in China, and I unpacked it, and we brought it back.
Oh, did you?
And
wow.
Peter, my friend, who was the Archduke of London, had to have it on his lap for the whole of the journey.
That's a long flight.
And we got it all the way back to Hackney, where we lived. And as I got it into the door, I chipped a little bit off the nose. It was so ridiculous. I was so annoyed.
No. Did you super glue it
back
on?
And you would never know.
You'd never know.
It was an experience.
My goodness. And your poor friend who had that on his lap the whole way back.
I know.
Long flight from China. That's incredible. I do think that's an amazing thing to go and see in situ, though, if you can.
Oh, it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, I would always recommend it. And of course, China now, we went to Shanghai, which was fantastic. We went to the Peace Hotel where Noel Coward wrote Private Lives.
Oh, wonderful.
And that was fantastic. And in fact, that's where we had our main meal of the 2-week stay. They had a hamburger place, and I can't tell you, it was so delicious.
What a joy.
And French fries. Oh my goodness, it was delicious. But, China is a wonderfully exotic place to go.
Yeah, and we look after, as you know, the Peninsula Group, and the hotel in Beijing and Shanghai, especially the one in Shanghai, is just superb.
Yes.
Really, really worth going to. Those hotels are just fantastic.
And Shanghai in those days there wasn't a tall skyscraper building anywhere. I mean, it was very primitive and really rather wonderful. Isn't the Bund?
Yeah, the Bund, yeah.
It was extraordinary.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Well, 40 years ago, you were very brave to be going to China, really.
Absolutely, we were.
Even on a military plane with a hot Bunsen burner making you a cup of tea.
We were all
amazing. Yeah, please put the flame out. Put the flame out. That's hysterical. Let's go on to number 4. What is the best meal or the best cocktail or restaurant? Food and drink is so important to all our lives, and it's so much part of travel. So let's just talk about food for a little while.
One of the most extraordinary trips I ever took was Richard Caring, who is, of course, the ultimate restaurateur in London, who has every restaurant going. And the Ivy and Annabelle's, they go on and on and on. Harry's Bar, one of my favorite restaurants in the world. And he took a group of us to St. Petersburg. And we were very lucky because we were friends. We were guests. And I think everybody paid £4,500 to go. And everybody was sent out in private jets, and we stayed in wonderful hotels. And he organized so many wonderful things, including on the last night we were there, this amazing dinner, charity dinner, which he raised that evening, £18 million for his children's charity. It was extraordinary. The cabaret was Elton John and Tina Turner.
Oh, wow.
Unbelievable. Clinton was the guest of honor. And when we all went back to the hotel we were in the Summer Palace. And after the do, we all went to the hotel, and Clinton went upstairs, changed out of his black tie, and came down in a sweater and a pair of slacks with his guitar.
No.
And sang for us all. I mean, it was unbelievable.
I didn't know he could sing. That's
incredible.
Yes,
he was very good too. But the most marvelous thing was that one of the days before we had this unbelievable ball, we went and stood by the river in St. Petersburg. And he'd arranged, there was a table, a huge round table, I can see it now, laden with caviar. And I adore caviar.
It's my favourite thing in the world.
But this was extraordinary. And we just sat there on a beautiful spring or summer evening with lashings of caviar. I mean, it was just in Russia, which, of course, was just wonderful.
Spoonfuls.
spoonfuls. I mean, it was quite incredible. So
On the
that
jacket potatoes, on the blinis,
oh, well,
on everything.
that's
Oh,
my favourite meal of all time.
me
Is to
too.
have a baked potato, and then what you do is when it's cooked, you take all the potato out of the skin, put the skin back into the oven, and then you mash up within an inch of itself the mashed potato, put it back into the crispy cases of the
Skin.
potato, and then cover with caviar. When I
So
die, it's my
delicious.
last meal.
Do you know, I think it is the most delicious thing. And there's a lovely restaurant in the south of France called La Petite Maison, I think
Oh
it is.
yes, I know.
In Nice, I think it is, run by the mad lady. Can't even remember what her name is. Nicole, I think her
Yes.
name is. But they do that. They bring those potatoes and just slap caviar over it. It's delicious.
She has a restaurant too behind Claridge's, doesn't she? Is that the same?
Yes, I don't know if it's the same owner. I think she might have franchised
right.
the name, but the one in the south of France. And she has a party trick where she comes and says hello to you, and then she gives you a glass of champagne, and then she drops it in front of you onto the floor, and the waiters come behind her. They know she's going to do it, and they just sweep it up. I mean, this is her party trick. It's absolutely mad, but it's an amazing restaurant.
Oh, and that is one of my favourite meals of all time.
Absolutely delicious. Very good. But how interesting that you went to that party. That sounds incredible.
It was incredible because on the night of the party, everyone dressed up in period clothing.
Oh, did they?
And he had wonderful eggs. What are the famous eggs?
Fabergé.
Fabergé eggs made. And when you opened it, that was full of caviar.
Oh, God.
And that's what we started the meal with. And it just went on and on and on.
Did he provide the clothing for you to wear?
Yes, everybody was supplied with.
So he took all your measurements before you got there.
Absolutely.
Clever.
And so all the dresses and jackets and it was just one of the most amazing evenings I've ever had.
Absolutely incredible. How wonderful. I actually met Bill Clinton once here at Claridge's. He was doing something for his AIDS foundation, and he was so mesmerizing because he's not actually a handsome man, but he has got the most amazing charisma. And he walked into the room, and I was there with my business partner then, my best friend, Sarah Mason. We were standing in the corner. He came straight up to us and he said, "Would you like a photo, girls?" And we were like, "Yes, please." I don't know where that photo is. I'd love a copy of that photograph.
I also think she's rather wonderful too, his wife.
Yeah, she wasn't there.
We went to a wonderful birthday party of a great friend of mine who sadly was dying. And she had this party and it was very, very glamorous. And I went as a sort of German woman in an outfit that we hired, and Neil went in his lederhosen. And we had no idea, but we were on the top table. And I had to climb over to get in this dress. And as I climbed down, there was Hillary Clinton right next to me. And she said,
"Did she laugh?
You've made a bit of an effort, haven't you?" She was wonderful.
Oh,
I was very impressed
I
with her.
would think you'd look like a very good Brunhilde.
Yeah, it was exactly Brunhilde.
Oh,
It was
that's
hysterical.
absolutely brilliant. Let's go on to the next travel secret. What is your best insider travel secret?
Don't take a lot of luggage. I mean, we all do it. And, you get there to wherever you're going and you suddenly have so much that it's a joke. I mean, in a way, the best way of traveling the world is to go on a cruise, because you get whatever you've taken, you take once, and then you unpack it, and you've got it there for the whole of your voyage, however long it is. And I like ships. I think they're
you
great.
love them, don't you?
They're really good, and I'm now doing a lot of talks on them, and it's good fun. We've just been on the new Queen Anne.
Have you?
They had a party. We had to go to Southampton. It was docked in Southampton, and then we got on in the afternoon. We had a tour of the ship, and then we had dinner, and then we went to bed, and then we got up the next morning, had breakfast, and left.
In Southampton?
In Southampton. We didn't go anywhere, but it was fantastic.
Is it a beautiful ship?
I tell you what's beautiful about it is they're very clever, Cunard. Because, as we know, that there is a class distinction on all these ships, and the class distinction is the restaurants. So there's the Queen's and the Princess Grill, which are the top. And they're lovely, but they're awfully red and gold and sort of period feel to it. Whereas the Queen Anne is so contemporary, it's not true. They've used a lot of glass, a lot of cream, a lot of nice natural colours, and it feels airy and it feels of today. And I was really impressed. And then the rest of the ship is like that too.
And where are you going on the Queen Anne? Are you going to go on a trip?
Well, we haven't gone on a trip yet because we're going on the Queen Mary in October, I think it is. But I would love to go on the Queen Anne.
Where are you going on the Queen Mary?
Well, we're going just 5 days into the Mediterranean and out again. But it's lovely. And the marvelous thing about it is people come to me and they're asked to go and do a talk. And they say to me, what do you think I should do? And I say, do you like people? And they go, not particularly. And I say, well, don't go.
Yeah,
because you can't stay in your cabin all day. I mean, it's pointless. You have to go out. And of course, if you go out, I mean, we were on the P&O line earlier this year, we went to America on that and around the Caribbean. And I must have done 1,000 selfies. Because that's what you do. If you're in the public eye, you have to, and everybody is so nice, but it can get a little exhausting. But if you hate people, then don't
do it. What do you do on your talks? I mean, what's the topic of your talk?
Well, funny enough, it's Siberian architecture. Brilliant. No, I'm joking.
I'm in shock. I was about to pass out. I was like, no, Biggins, this is not something I thought
sadly,
you would be
it's me. I talk about me and the people I've met. It's a real name-dropping hour for the... But it is great. And you show pictures of you with people and what have you. So I really enjoy it. And they seem to enjoy it too. And I'm very gossipy and tell, sort of risque stories about people.
Oh, how fabulous. I'd love to come and listen to that.
That is what I do. And it's great, And you do that, and then you'll do another Q&A 2 nights later. I mean, it's a lovely way to travel the world.
And do you get off and go on the sightseeing?
Yes, but I tell you, often when you go on, you have to book the tours in advance, and it's much better to actually get a car. And Uber now is everywhere in the world. And in fact, going back to what we talked about earlier, the Ubers in New York are fantastic.
Yeah.
And very, very cheap, much cheaper than the yellow cabs.
And they don't know where they're going anyway, the yellow cabs, and they're rude.
But so we often get a cab and go on our own, which is much more interesting. And you don't have to follow thousands of people. I think it's a wonderful way of traveling the world. I mean, you get a lot of people now on these cruises who treat them as an old people's home. And they go on and they pay. It's cheaper than staying in an old people's home.
I know some people go and they live on them, don't they?
They live on them, exactly.
Absolutely.
They have a cabin with no windows.
Oh, that's a bit grim.
Yeah, send me to my death very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
But they do it because it's cheap, and they 4 meals a day. And I remember the first cruise I ever did. We had dinner, lovely dinner, and then we were going back and having a drink and going back to our cabin. And suddenly at midnight, I came across a queue of people, and I said, "What are you queuing for?" And they said, "The midnight buffet."
You're joking.
Well, you can't have enough food on these. I mean, they just give you food all the time. And the fact that these people were queuing for the midnight buffet was appalling.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
I mean, it really is. I mean, talk about getting value for money.
Exactly. What's the best one you've ever been on?
Well, the best cruise I've ever been on has to be Friends. Who have a wonderful boat. And I've been on many of those. And that is another, when there's just 12 of you or perhaps 10 of you, and it's another world. I mean, it is fantastic. And, I'm not going to mention any names, but I've been on some absolutely brilliant yachts. Unbelievable. And it's another world. I mean, that is something, and the other thing I also think, if you're going to, my travel tip, is to always get a private jet. I mean,
wonderful.
Because and I tell you the thing about a private jet, which is so wonderful, is that when you're landing at whichever airport you're landing at, you can see your car coming up with the aeroplane, and as the car stops, you stop, and you get out of the airplane into your car. I mean, that is to me divinity. Yeah. I mean, the trouble with flying nowadays is airports.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
I mean, you walk. I've had a new knee put in, so I'm very careful now, and I do. The assistants, and I don't care if people see me in a wheelchair.
Absolutely.
And you get taken to the top of the queues of everywhere, and it's fantastic. Whereas if you actually had to walk,
it's a long way.
You could, you walk miles.
No, absolutely. If I won the lottery, my only thing I would change is that I would fly privately.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There are several things I would do if I won the lottery tonight. And let's hope we do. It is Wednesday, isn't it?
And
Yes.
it's a very big jackpot.
It's a big jackpot. It's going to be good. So I would have, you're right, a private jet. And actually, I wouldn't have own one because I think that's too much. I would hire them.
Yeah.
But I would also have a chauffeur, which I can't think of anything better
No,
in central
wonderful.
London or wherever you're going. And I would have a cook. And I would say to the cook, Mrs. Bridges, there's 12 of us tonight. We'd like your cheese souffle.
Absolutely
You know,
wonderful.
that to me is life.
Didn't you actually do that somewhere? You went on a holiday and somebody said that they hated the food and that you had to be in charge or something.
Absolutely. We picked up the ship in Italy, and the hostess was very down that night. We had dinner. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, oh, I'm so excited about this trip. She said, but the awful thing is I've got to do all the food. I said, what do you mean? Well, I have to have conversations with the cook as to what we're going to have. And I said, well, I'll do it. And immediately the relief on her face was unbelievable. She then enjoyed herself and I had a ball.
Bet you did. How
It was
marvellous.
just wonderful. Well, we'll have the caviar tonight, or can we have fresh fish? I mean, it was just my idea of heaven.
So you did go down to and say, Mrs. Bridges, will I have
Absolutely. Or I had her up, if you pardon the
Yeah, oh,
expression.
yes,
One
exactly.
of the, but it is so luxurious.
Let's go on to the travel secret number 6. What is the most poignant trip or memory that you've ever had traveling?
We did a river cruise down the Mekong River in Vietnam. It was wonderful. It was, I don't know, have you done a river cruise?
Nope, I haven't.
They are marvellous. And it's not many people. It's sort of like the most 60, I would think. And it's wonderful food. And you do go and see the most amazing things. Phnom Penh, which is where the killing fields are, is extraordinary because they have these underground tunnels where people used to hide rather than get killed. And it is extraordinary. It's very, very emotional. And you see unbelievable cities which have never been inhabited, which they built, and they are exquisite buildings. And it is just fantastic. But the history of what happened. I mean, one of my favourite shows ever is Miss Saigon.
I loved it.
Which is fantastic because there's a wonderful saxophone medley in that film.
On
in that
a
play.
solo saxophone.
Saxophone. Oh, it just gets me. And it's the most extraordinary city. Because Saigon now is called something different. You know, they changed all the names of these places. But when you go to Saigon, it is quite frightening because everybody, and cyclists are my bête noire. I mean, if I could, I'd murder every cyclist in the world, especially in London. In fact, I'd go out in a tank and shoot them all. But anyway, in Saigon, they have so many cyclists, and they come on the pavement. I mean, they're everywhere. And you sort of know that. So you
have to be careful.
You have to be very careful. But it is the most exquisite country. And everybody is so lovely and kind, and they're willing to show you everything in their lives. I mean, it is wonderful. It's
That
very
sounds
special.
amazing. Absolutely fantastic.
And a wonderful way to see it
Yeah.
going down the Mekong River.
Yes, absolutely. And was it a beautiful boat?
Beautiful boat, really beautiful. I mean, and very large cabins. And, you know, you'd wake up in the morning and you'd be sailing down and you'd see all sorts of different things, different animals and everything. It was just wonderful.
Did you go with friends? Or
Yes.
Yeah,
It
sounds
was
really
terrific.
amazing. Wonderful. So I asked you to bring a photograph that sums up travel to you. Can you tell us about the photograph and why that means something to you?
Well, it's a photograph of Neil, my partner, and myself on holiday on a beach. And we're very relaxed. And I think, you know, holidays are terribly important because we work so hard. And as I said earlier, it doesn't matter if you go to Cornwall, you go to Bognor, you go, you know, to exotic places like the Maldives or anywhere in the world, New York, anywhere you go, it's important to get away. And you can do it now. Travel is so available to everybody.
Yeah, and accessible, exactly.
Exactly. And it used to be only for the rich. You know, they were the people who traveled to exotic places and you know, you take 140 pieces of luggage, you know, and it was something special. But now you can do it so easily. But there's a piece today on television which terrified me. And I'm going to say this now on your program. It's important to take insurance out because a man went to Turkey on holiday, didn't take any insurance, and they will not let him leave the hospital because he owes £41,000.
Oh, my goodness, really?
And they've got his passport,
Oh, really?
and they won't let him leave the country, let alone leave the hospital, until he pays.
That's scary.
It is scary. And, travel insurance is so readily available.
It is, absolutely.
And if you are traveling, please, please take out an insurance policy.
That's a very, very good tip. I think it's very important, actually. And because of what's going on in the world, you have to cancel and something happens. You don't want to get stuck somewhere, do you?
And of course, nowadays, every other country you go to is having a war.
Yeah, it's very
So you've got to be very careful.
Very careful.
I mean, I long, well, what can I say? I long for wars to finish because, some of the places I've been to, like Russia, were just fantastic places, which you can't, and I don't know whether we'll ever go again.
I know.
And that is awful. And, we're lucky. We've seen some amazing things.
Yeah.
And done some amazing places we've been to. So I think it's important, but it's increasingly more difficult.
More difficult. So let's pray that there is peace and that these wars do come to an end. But what's next for Biggins? Where are you going next, and what's next on your horizon?
Well, I'm very lucky, and of course, we went to Japan this year because it was on my wish list, which was fantastic. We went to Tokyo, and then we took the Queen Elizabeth and travelled around the Japanese islands, which was fantastic. We sat next to at dinner a Japanese mother and her children, boy and a girl. The girl was beautiful, and every night she used to come out in the most fantastic outfits.
Oh, how lovely.
And she was a mermaid.
A mermaid?
Yes, and she is a professional mermaid, and she takes her tail with her, and she has pictures by this pool and all various places. She was absolutely fascinating, and I think that's the marvelous thing about travel. You bump into the most extraordinarily bizarre people. I mean, how many mermaids have you met?
I've never met a mermaid, but it's now going to be on my wish list. I wish to meet a mermaid. How fantastic.
But it is, if we're lucky enough to travel, it is just wonderful.
It's the most wonderful thing. And you have taken me all around the world. So, Biggins, it's been a joy and a delight to share your travel secrets. Thank you so much for joining me.
Tanya, it's a pleasure.